Welcome into another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. Been a little bit of time since the last episode, so we've got a lot to dive into today. I'm going to try and keep the game recaps a little bit more brief since some of them were about a week ago, but we had some great games that happened over the weekend that we wanted to briefly touch on that have some implications, I think, as the season moves along here. And maybe put some teams on fraud alert, which we'll get into later in the episode. But before we talk about the games from Saturday, I wanted to give a huge shout out the DePaul Blue Demons finally getting their first Big East win in 2 seasons over Georgetown, 73-68. Granted, Georgetown was without 2 of their best players, but still a Big East win nonetheless. So can't really take that away from DePaul.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably put an asterisk on this game just because Sorber and Epps were out, but that's a completely different team for Ed Cooley especially when Sorber's out. Sorber's incredible, and I haven't got to watch him all that much up until these last few games, but he's been incredible. And without him, they're not even close to the same team defensively. But yeah, credit to Chris Holtman for finally getting this team over the hump and, just at least winning a conference game.
Yeah, but even still, they've been more competitive, right? I mean, we knew that this was probably still going to be a bad season for them. It was going to be them and Seton Hall at the bottom. But they've been competitive in some games. Like, they were down, 13 late against Marquette, ended up only losing by 2. They at least have put some scares into teams a little bit that's more than, what they've maybe been the last few years. So, it seems like they're maybe headed the right direction for whatever that's worth, or whatever you can really get to in terms of a ceiling at DePaul.
Yeah, I mean, I expected a little bit better out of them in conference play too. I mean, it was a pretty promising non-con outside of, kind of getting blown out by Texas Tech. They held their own in all their other games. They held serve in their bye games. So, but it looks like they are going in the right direction with Holtman. As much as I don't really love him as a coach or a program builder overall, I do think it's definitely in the right direction from what they've had there in the past.
Yeah, for sure. Now, looking at Saturday's slate last week, Auburn played Georgia, took them down by 2. They had a little bit more of a comfortable lead. It was kind of hovering in that 8 to 10 range with about 8 minutes left. And Georgia made a bit of a run, ended up losing 70-68. But I think what we've seen over the last week is really just how good Auburn is, because Janai Broom's been out, obviously, as we talked about in one of our last episodes. And they handled Mississippi State last Tuesday, and then on the weekend still got the job done against a good Georgia team, a team that we weren't very high on coming in, but got the job done on the road, right? And without arguably the best player in the country, that's a tough feat for any team. So, major props to them. But I think this also shows that Georgia is more legit than we've given them credit for.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think Georgia is pretty legit. And I think they're not a surefire NCAA tournament team, but they're a really good team. I could see them landing on the 8-9 seed line and giving a 1 seed a really tough time in the second round. But the difference for Auburn this year, obviously we've talked about it a little bit, is the guard play. Obviously Broom's been fantastic, but the emergence of Tahad Pettiford has given them more stability in the backcourt. They had to rely on guys like Wendell Green and KD Johnson in the past. They're just too erratic, and that's what led to a lot of road losses for them in the last couple of years in SEC play. But in Pettiford, he is a bit erratic at times, but he's a much better shot maker, and there is more poise in the backcourt than there ever has been. So they have a complete team, and I still consider them the best team in America. Maybe not without Broom, but with him back in the lineup, they're surefire the best team in America.
Yeah, I agree. Next game, West Virginia took down Iowa State. Your Cyclones took them down at home by 7. West Virginia's been a really weird team. They lost to Houston by 16, granted on the road. Then they take down Iowa State at home. Then they turn back around and lose to Arizona State at home by 8 in a game where the offense just did not show up. I think they shot at one point, I don't know what they ended up shooting from the field, but I think they were like sub 10% from three or something. It was ugly. So, this was a tough spot, I think, for Iowa State coming off that emotional victory, as they are. Any game against Kansas in that league, that's a game you get up for. And, they took care of business beating Kansas by 17 on Wednesday. Then you turn back around and you play at West Virginia, which is, they've been much better than expected. And that was a game they were going to be ready for. So to then have to go on the road and play that game, like, it was just a tough spot, I think. I'm not going to overreact to that loss for Iowa State. Like, any sort of in-conference road game after like an emotional high win against like a top level team like Kansas, I don't think it's too much to read into.
Yeah, and I'm not going to read into it too much. I still think they're an elite team, a top 3 team in the country for my money. But the offense, you have to watch out for it a little bit with the loss of Momcilovic. He's going to be out for like 4 or 5 more weeks with the broken hand or wrist or whatever it was. But it just takes away one of the shooters that they kind of relied on. But the emergence of Curtis Jones has been huge, and he's going to have more of a workload now. And yeah, I'm not going to read too much into this game. West Virginia they're just a giant killer. That's what they are. They play extremely slow. They walk the ball up the floor every single possession just to limit the possession count against teams that are more talented than them. But it makes them prone to the type of losses that they're going to take against a team like Arizona State. So, like long term, I think it's a team to watch out for in a tournament setting, because they're used to playing slow and games slow down in March Madness. But definitely a bit concerning that they're losing these games as well, just with the lack of offensive firepower.
Yeah, no, I agree. 57 points on the road is not going to get it done. But we'll see how they fare here. They're headed out on their West Coast swing. They got Arizona State, Arizona, Saturday, Monday. So I expect them to get back on track with no problem. High-scoring one Saturday at Rupp Arena, 102-97. Alabama took down Kentucky. This was a much-needed win for Alabama after their blunder last week, early in the week. They just didn't play very well against Ole Miss at home, losing by 10. Turned back around, put up 102 on Kentucky. Real quality win on the road against an in-conference rival.
Yeah, super fun game too. Up and down, a bunch of shot making in this game, but it was Alabama's rim dominance that won out. They got to the line a ton in this game, and we're really starting to see the cracks in this Kentucky defense. They've fallen. I think they're all the way down in like the 85 to 90 range in defensive efficiency on Ken Palm right now, and that's not going to cut it long term, like we've talked about. They just shown like major cracks. They do have good perimeter defenders, but the lack of rim protection, I think people kind of overestimated what Amari Williams really was as a rim protector. I don't think he's an elite SEC rim protector. So, but either way, really good win for Alabama. It's tough to beat quality teams on the road in this league, as we've seen throughout conference play. Anybody can beat anybody. So that win's going to go a long way for them.
Yeah, for sure. Now we had Vanderbilt take down Tennessee on Saturday. I'm fired up about this.
Your Commodores.
My Commodores are now 15-4, 3-3 in the SEC. Big win over Tennessee, who was ranked 6th at the time. They also beat South Carolina last week. Both of them at home. Then they went at Alabama on Tuesday night, lost by 16, gave up a big number, 103. I think Vanderbilt, like we talked about early in the season, right? They're the kind of team that's they're good enough where they can put some scare into some teams. They can win some games at home, but like some of those conference games on the road, they're still going to be kind of who they are. They're not an elite defensive team by any stretch, but they have the ability to beat, I don't know if I'd say anyone, but most teams in this conference at home. So, that win's really good for them. I mean, it's looking like that could be maybe a tournament punching win when it's all said and done, depending on how they play the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I think they're absolutely good enough to slide into the tournament. I think I underestimated what this team was going to be defensively. Honestly, the perimeter defenders are pretty incredible. Like guys like Grant Huffman and Chris Magnon have really they were underestimated. Nobody really talked about them coming into the season. And Magnon, especially, he's an incredible defender. Just the versatility in his game is pretty ridiculous. He can guard pretty much 1 through 5. So it's been super impressive. Just the one issue obviously is the size up front with this team. Like McLaughlin and Carey aren't necessarily your great rim protectors, but they turn teams over at a high rate, and they were able to do that against Tennessee. Obviously followed it up with a tough loss against Alabama, but it's really tough to get into a track meet with Alabama, like the faster in a super fast paced game. Like Alabama was going to win that game 9 times out of 10. But I bought more stock into Vandy. I know you had a lot of stock, bought
Really.
recent early in the year, so but I'm starting to buy it a little bit more now.
Yeah, I think we're gonna look back here around like February 15th, and that's gonna be the real telling point of like, all right, where is this team at? Because they have 6 games over the next few weeks where they have Kentucky, Oklahoma, Florida, Texas, Auburn, Tennessee. If they can somehow get out of that stretch at 3-3, I think we're looking at like surefire tournament. If they come back and they're like 2-4, 1-5, I would say 2-4 is probably the most likely. But it's going to be a tough stretch here. And then after those 6 games, they follow that with at Kentucky and home to Ole Miss. So they're in the midst of a pretty rough stretch. Not to say that like any stretch in the SEC is easy, but they're in the midst of a pretty rough one.
Yeah, and I think they'll be okay. Like at the end of the day in this league, you're going to have quad one opportunities all over the place. It's going to be a matter of how the committee is going to value an SEC team that's 6-12 or 5-13 that has like probably a good enough resume, which I think, I mean, right now there's 13 projected SEC teams getting into the tournament, which I agree with. They did so much work in the non-con against every other power league that I think they deserve it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Also on Saturday, we had Creighton take down UConn 68-63. UConn, not the power that they've been, had to use overtime the other night to beat Butler at home. And granted, like McNeely's out still. So I don't know. They're just not. They're not that good. I don't think. Like we're starting to realize they're not very deep. Hurley's just continuing to kind of make a fool of himself. Some of the things he's saying, and like, he got into it. For anyone who saw it, like getting into it with the official, and like he told the official, "Don't turn your back on me. I'm the greatest coach in the country." And then he got asked about it in his post-game presser, and he just kind of like snarkily chuckled and said, "Yeah." Like, I don't know. It's almost like I kind of have this problem with it. It's like so you're basically saying if you didn't win the last 2 national championships, you shouldn't be getting calls. I don't know. Like the game should be reffed in the middle, in theory, right? But he's basically like trying to argue like, we've earned calls and other teams haven't. I don't know what. Like each year is independent of another.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't read into it too much. Like his team has like a pretty serious foul issue. Like they're one of the top teams in the country in fouling, and it passes the eye test. Like they just like when Samson Johnson's on the floor, especially like he hacks pretty much everyone that attacks the rim against him. He's a little bit too erratic defensively, but this team has major defensive issues. They're not athletic enough on the perimeter, and they do really miss Liam McNeely right now, especially on the offensive side of the floor too. Just his creation is key on this team that is kind of relying on Alex Caravan to create a ton of offense for this team, and that's not his nature at all. On the 2 national championship teams, he was the 4th or 5th option, and he was being used as a spot up shooter or moving off screens, and obviously they still do that a lot, but I think it is a talent and athleticism issue with this team right now. And that's on Hurley for not recruiting the right way. You know, they threw a bag at Aiden Mahaney, who I was pretty skeptical about, and it just hasn't been great. He's
Barely plays. He doesn't even score.
No, he's a zero on really on both ends of the floor. A bit of a liability on defense.
Every box score I see, he's like 0 for 2 to 0 for 4, 0 points, like maybe 1 rebound, and that's it. Dude's just out there getting cardio in for like 8 minutes, and then he goes back to the bench. I mean,
yeah, and that was just a major miss that really hurt the rest of the recruiting for Hurley, because I think they threw a lot of money at him. I don't know the exact number, but yeah, obviously he knows what he needs to do for next year. Like, they like to have more athleticism on the perimeter, and they don't have it right now.
No. And the final game from Saturday, we're going to talk about Santa Clara taking down Gonzaga 103-99. Gonzaga lost twice last week, also losing to Oregon State on the road in overtime. They're appearing to be a bit fraudulent.
Yeah, the defense it's a problem. It's like a layup line right now. Like against Oregon State, like they got whatever they wanted at the rim. Michael Ratai and Fala, and even the guard play of Oregon State that really wasn't that great was able to score with pretty solid efficiency. And then it rolled over into their home game at the Kennel against Santa Clara. Granted, Santa Clara made pretty much every single three they took in the second half. A lot of them were wide open. And we'll talk about a guy here in a few minutes that had an unbelievable game. But yeah, they have serious issues on the defensive end. Granted, we talked about it. Like, the WCC is a really good league this year. Gonzaga still should be winning this league by one or if not multiple games. And it's just the rim protection is a major issue. Like, Graham Ike at the 5 is a real problem. He's not a rim protector in any aspect, and they don't really have a guy to replace him right now. So not sure how fixable these issues are.
Yeah, no, I agree. They're like, they'll be fine and make the tournament, presumably, unless they continue to slide here in conference. But might be we be looking at the first time ever where Gonzaga is like hovering. If they go like, I don't know how many league games they play, but if they are a few games over 500 in the league, if they continue to give up these kind of points, like, who knows?
They can't take many more losses. If they take 5 or 6 losses in the WCC, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they missed, because they don't really have any major wins in non-con right now. Losing that game to Kentucky, huge. Losing to West Virginia and Atlantis, like, those are key losses. You needed those games, and now they have to run the table, or they can afford 1 or 2 losses. Like, the St. Mary's losses aren't going to kill them, but overall, like, they're probably looking at a 7 seed or 6 seed at the best right now. So it's pretty ugly. And they've made the Sweet 16 every year since 2015. And they're in real danger of not doing that this year.
But then on the flip, what team wants to see Gonzaga as a 7? Really?
Nobody.
Right? Like, what 2 seed is pumped to see Gonzaga as the 7 in their bracket?
They are dangerous. They'd be one of the most dangerous 7 seeds of all time. Like, their offense is still legit. So it's just the defense that has problems.
Right. Moving on to Sunday, just one game we want to touch on here. Is Michigan State the best team that nobody's really talking about? Because it's pretty quiet, right? Michigan State's quietly 16-2 now, 7-0 in the Big Ten. Took down Illinois by 2 at home on Sunday, and they're up to number 8 in the country. But nobody's really even been talking about them.
No, it's pretty crazy, and it's been the rebound dominance that's really gotten them there, playing those 2 big lineups we talked about in the last pod. Like Jackson Kohler and Zapala, and they run a 5 big rotation. They kind of just rotate those bigs in and out, and it's led to the interior dominance that keeps their floor super, super high. But really the main story in this game was Kasparas Yakachonis only playing 9 minutes, and he fouled out in those 9 minutes. He had 2 fouls right away in the first half, sat out the rest of the half, then picked up a quick 2 in the start of the second half. So he really wasn't even on the floor. Like, he didn't really have any time to create anything. And the fact that Illinois still only lost this game by 2, I think shows how good this team really is. Like, the predictive metrics and like Ken Palm and Torvik have this team as like a top 6 or 7 team, I believe. And it does match the eye test, especially when Yakachonis is in the mix. I think they're absolutely in the mix to win a title right now because just the balance is so great. But you got to credit Michigan State for the work that they've done and the fact that nobody's talked about them. They just don't have that one star that sticks out to make them like nationally relevant in everyone's eyes, but they're all the way legit in my eyes.
Yeah, no, they definitely are. I just coupling their coach, the experience with, like a pretty talented roster that plays well together, like that can't be discredited, especially come March.
For sure. Absolutely.
So then we had a few games on Tuesday. Monday wasn't really much going on. A couple games Tuesday. Tennessee bounced back after that loss to Vanderbilt over the weekend. Took down Mississippi State by 12. And Ohio State, they got right a little bit. They had lost 3 in a row. Another like resume builder for them. They haven't been very good, but a quality win here on the road at Purdue, who had moved all the way up to 11th in the country, which probably was a little bit high, but where they found themselves naturally just by how everyone else was doing. Ohio State picked up this win 73-70, and they continue to win some of these big games. Micah Parrish was awesome in this game, had 22. Devin Royal and like Bruce Thornton didn't even score the ball very much in this game. Only had 11 points, but he's their orchestrator, right? I mean, they kind of go as he goes, and other guys kind of picked up the slack. So really quality win, obviously, for Ohio State that, if they can get hot here, that could go a long way in terms of determining their fate come Selection Sunday.
Yeah, they have a super weird resume right now. Like, they have 2 massive wins. Like, a win over Purdue in Mackey is one of the bigger wins of the season, honestly, that nobody's going to talk about. And then obviously they beat Kentucky and MSG, which is another massive win. But they have some blowout losses, and then like they just recently lost to Indiana at home right before this game. So just a pretty volatile team, a team that relies on their shot making a ton. But Purdue they were due for a loss, in my opinion. The defense, I think, was getting a little bit too much credit for what it was doing lately. Like, nobody was making shots against them, and it finally bit them in this game.
Yeah, like you said, to the volatile point about Ohio State, they've lost to, I think they lost to Auburn by like 38. And then they beat Kentucky by 20 the next weekend, right? So those were literally one Saturday apart. So just the highs and lows of this team are pretty crazy, honestly, and it's going to be interesting to see how the committee judges that come March.
For sure, and the Big Ten isn't getting I don't really think it's getting enough credit for how good and how deep it really is. Like, there are 5 or 6 teams at the top of this league that I think could make a pretty significant run in March. They just don't really have like the true NBA talent, star power that some of these other leagues have, like the SEC and the Big 12. But yeah, there's plenty of opportunities to win games in this league, and I think they're sitting at like 10 or 11 teams that are projected to get in the field right now.
Yeah, no, I know. Some of them are a bit questionable probably, and we'll see how it all shakes out. I know it's, like Lenardi's projections, which he's usually pretty good, but we'll see. And then last night we had a few games of note. Texas A&M took down Ole Miss 63-62. Required a second half comeback. They were down 7 at the half, ended up winning the second half 37-29 to win by 1. St. John's ended up this was a really bad beat for anyone that was on Xavier, 79-71.
It was.
This was a 7.5 point spread for anyone that had Xavier plus 7.5. St. John's covered in overtime. So you're thinking overtime, all right, like they're going to keep it within 8, not so fast. Then another game, Florida hit a game winner last night. Will Richard hit a layup against South Carolina to take them down 70-69. So a few big games last night, nothing too crazy, but a few of note.
Yeah, I don't even want to talk about that Xavier game. Honestly, I'm a little bit too upset about it, but we'll talk about St. John's here in a little bit anyway. And then Ole Miss, they had that game stolen from them. Basically, they were winning essentially the entire game before Manny Obaseki hit a huge three with like 3 seconds left, I believe, and Ole Miss missed, I think, 2 front ends of 1-and-1s to really get them back into this game. So definitely a heartbreaker and a huge win for A&M. And that's just how they profile as a team that can go on the road and pretty much beat anybody because they win the shot volume battle against basically every single team they play.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, we got a few player shout outs from the week. First one for you anyways is Juwan Roberts. Before you speak to him, UCF, what a weird team, right? I mean, they're one of the worst defensive teams in the country, at least in the Power 5, right? But then they play against Houston, who obviously they like to keep the possession count low, but they play Houston at home, and this game is just a total like rock fight, 69-68. Houston wins it on a game winner by Juwan Roberts. But they're a weird team.
Yeah, they really are. And it's a little bit of a different Johnny Dawkins team that we're used to seeing, like the elite rim protection, elite front line defensively, but they've kind of switched into a more offensive centric team that likes to play super fast. And on the Houston side, they're going to have a few of these games just because they're not an elite level shot making team. They don't have like a true star that they can go to late in games. Like LJ Cryer, you could consider that, but he's not like an on ball dominant player. So, but for Juwan Roberts, I think he's the unsung hero basically in the entire country. Nobody talks about this guy. This is his 4th year in the program. I believe he might be a 5th year. I'm not sure, but he's basically the backbone of this team, and nobody really talks about him. He's taking a little bit more of the offensive load this year. They're using him more in post-up opportunities, and he went for 21 and 9 in this game, including the game winner. Like, this would have been a tough loss. Like, they're sitting like as a projected 3 or 4 seed right now with like no major wins so far. So that's a loss that they couldn't really afford if they want to be a top 2 seed again, like they typically have been in past tournaments.
Yeah, no, I agree. Roberts feel like he's been there forever, but he's just been steady for them, for so long. The next player you had there came from the Santa Clara Gonzaga game. Huge performance by Tyree Bryan.
Yeah, I mean, he was the reason they won this game. Like, he went nuclear in the second half. I think he made 5 or 6 of these threes in the second half, and he went for 35 on 7 of 12 shooting from 3. Just really an incredible performance across the board for this team. I believe they made 18 or 19 threes in this game, which is ridiculous in a road game in that kind of environment. But yeah, credit to the Broncos too. They're like maybe not a dark horse candidate because they've taken some tough losses, but there's like an at-large avenue for them if they can continue to pick up these wins against quality teams. They're going to have to beat St. Mary's probably both times to sneak into that conversation, but there's some dangerous teams in this league, and Santa Clara is one of them.
Yeah, for sure. And then the last game, or the last player shout out was a Stanford guy, but for anyone who really knows, really a Duke guy. Stabbing into the hearts of UNC fans one more time, picking up a game winner at UNC, had 20 points, 7 assists. Probably that might be his career high. Probably is. But took them down 72-71, I believe it was, at the buzzer at the Dean Dome. So really, really big performance for him. And I'm sure UNC fans aren't going to want to hear anything about a Duke guy turned Stanford Cardinal that ripped their hearts apart. But
Yeah, pretty cool moment, honestly, for him to come back and play UNC and hit that shot. He went for 20 points and 7 assists in this game, and I'm actually surprised at the development of his game. Like, he's turned into like, he's the primary guard on this team now, and, this Stanford team is sneaky really good and sneaky really good on the offensive end, and he's been, one of the main pieces. Obviously, Maxime Reynaud is the engine that makes this team go, but having Blake's has only really helped this offense.
Yeah, I mean, he's averaging almost 15 points a game now, 5 assists. Like, I did not expect that at all.
The guy didn't even touch the ball at Duke. He would be on the floor for 25 minutes at times and just basically hound the other team's best offensive guard on the perimeter. But now he's actually turning into an actual offensive weapon.
Yeah, no, I know. Moving on, we're going to do a typical thing that we like to do, buy or sell. We've got a few things to go through. First one, Gonzaga does not win the West Coast Conference regular season title. Buy or sell?
They're 2 games down right now on St. Mary's, but I'm going to sell the fact that they don't win the conference. I actually do think they still end up winning this league. St. Mary's, they're sitting at 6-0, but they've played nobody in this conference. Their schedule coming up, I think their next 7 games involves them playing like the top 6 teams in the entire league, including one against Gonzaga here coming up quick.
Yeah, I was gonna say their schedule coming. They're at Washington State, they're at Santa Clara, they're at San Francisco, they've got at Oregon State. Like, they play on the road. Not only do they play, 6 of the top teams, but they're like 4 of them are on the road. They do have Gonzaga at home and San Francisco at home, but their schedule coming is pretty brutal.
Yeah, and they still have holes. Like, it's not like they fixed all of their issues. Like, defensively, they showed holes against quality teams, and they've kind of just been covered up by the fact that they haven't played anyone good.
They showed holes against bad teams. They almost lost to Merrimack at home.
Yeah, and UTSA. Like, they almost
Right.
lost those games, and they're volatile. Like, they're not volatile, but there's just not like they play super slow. They're fairly similar to like what West Virginia does. Like, they try to kind of muck the game up. But obviously, Gonzaga, they're gonna have to sweep the series against St. Mary's to do this. I still think they have the offensive firepower to get it done, and they're still the class of the league in my eyes. So I'm gonna say they sneak this out, whether it's on a tiebreaker or they ended up winning it by 1 game. I'm gonna say they win.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think that pedigree is just too much. St. Mary's is going to drop a few of these games here at some point, especially in kind of the reconfigured West Coast Conference. So I think Gonzaga still gets it done. Just a slow start for them, but still plenty of time. The next one, Louisville is a dark horse Final Four contender. I'll let you start.
Honestly, I have no idea. This team is very confusing to me. I mean, they're on an incredible run right now. They've won 9 straight, I believe. They're sitting at 8-1 in the league, and credit to Pat Kelsey for what he's done. This team has a ton of balance. They control the rebound battle every single game, and they take a ton of threes. But the fact that they're not even making a ton of threes right now, and they're still winning all these games, just kind of shows the upside of this team. I don't think they have a ton of great shooting, but they're always going to continue to fire away. As for them being a Final Four contender, I'm going to say no, because I do think they've shown an inability to punch up against really, really good competition. Like, they have a win over UNC, but I'll come out and say it, that's not really good competition. They've been very underwhelming. So I'm going to say they're not a dark horse Final Four contender. They're surely in the NCAA tournament right now, but I think they're kind of getting away with playing some of the lower tier teams in the ACC.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not buying it. I think they're an okay team that I think they'll beat who they're like supposed to beat, or maybe on the same level as. But when it comes to like some of those top teams, like we saw them play against Tennessee earlier in the year, they got rolled. That game was never even close. Duke took care of business against them. Like, I just don't think they can really hang with those top teams, especially with Pryor out for the season. I think that's going to come back to hurt them. Like I think they'll end up like still making the tournament. They'll be fine. They'll have a nice season and maybe win a tournament game. But other than that, I'm not sure really how far I see them going.
Yeah, I mean, they could throw up a 5 for 30, 35 3-point shooting game and lose to a lot of different teams in an NCAA tournament setting. I think it's just there's a little bit too much volatility on the main stage. Like, I mean, they've had some games where they've had to scratch out wins against UTEP and Eastern Kentucky. They had to win at the buzzer. So I do think they're a tad fraudulent, but I will give them more credit, especially for what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. Then the last one, I wanted to throw this one in here. For those of you who have listened all along, not a Villanova guy, not a Kyle Neptune guy. And right now seems like a good opportunity to express that because they've been struggling a little bit as of late. Now sitting at 12-8, 5-4 in the Big East. Had a really ugly end to the game the other night at home against Georgetown, what ended up being a 1-point loss. This team sucks. They don't really, but in the grand scheme of like what Villanova basketball is supposed to be, what Jay Wright turned this into, and now like where it is with Kyle Neptune, like a game against Georgetown at home is a game you have to win. They did beat Providence on Friday night, but they barely squeaked it out at home against a bad Providence team at home, right? So, I'm going to say I buy this. Like Villanova still sucks. Like they can beat anyone, but they're also so capable of losing to anybody.
They are, and it's just they haven't really fixed the defensive issues. And honestly, the late game offense in those last few games against Providence and Georgetown was very ugly. Like Eric Dixon can only take you so far, but when you continue to throw him in isolation opportunities against really good defenders, like Neptune had him isolated against Micah Peavy, who's probably one of the better wing defenders in the entire country. It's just not a really good setup for success late in the game. And the offensive has obviously been great all year long, but yeah, Neptune is holding them back. And hopefully, honestly, for Villanova's long-term sake, that they finish 500 or a little bit below so they can kind of, show this guy the door, because they need somebody else. They need he's being masked by the fact that Eric Dixon has been so good. He's been a top 5 player in the entire country. He's made everything go for this team. So yeah, I mean, that they probably need to see him leave before they make an actual leap into contention again.
Yeah, I agree. Now moving on to a couple of teams we want to talk about who are on fraud watch a little bit. First team being Tennessee. If you look at their record, right, they're 17-2, 4-2 in the league. But they did lose to Vanderbilt over the weekend. And I think we're going to learn a lot about whether they're truly frauds or not here by next Saturday, because their next 3 games are Auburn, Kentucky, Florida. They're at home against Kentucky on Tuesday, at home against Florida next Saturday, February 1st, at Auburn this Saturday. So if they could get out of that 2-1, I'd maybe pump the brakes on their fraud watch. But I think that, the offense is a little bit concerning, especially if Lanier is not making shots. You're depending on like Zakai Ziegler, who that's not really his game, to go get you some buckets. So like if Lanier's not scoring the ball like he has been all year, like this team I think could lose. I could see them as a team that gets bounced early in the tournament in March, just because they need his offense.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically why I classified them in this fraud watch category. This is the same old Rick Barnes team that is elite defensively. They're going to be top 5 defensively all year long. The offense is going to hold them back once again. And Chaz Lanier he's regressed in conference play. He's against better defenders. He's really struggled to create space and, find a way to get open looks. Although he did bounce back against Mississippi State, who gave him a ton of looks off of screens, and that perimeter defense of Mississippi State has its own issues. But yeah, trusting Zakai Ziegler to create offense when Lanier hasn't got it going is not something that I want to trust. And yeah, I would say that they're probably a second weekend team in the tournament at best, and it's going to be another year for Rick Barnes not being in the Final Four in my eyes.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Like last year was the year that they were going to make it. Where you had a star in Dalton Connect, and I completely bought into it. And the fact that the offense still wasn't even like top 15 in the entire country was a serious problem.
Yeah. Then the other team, Rick Pitino and the St. John's Red Storm, who, they're winning games. They're currently sitting at the top of the Big East, but some of their wins have not come in very comfortable fashion. Been ugly at times.
Yeah, how many comebacks do they have to make? Like, they've really struggled in first halves of games. Like, they were down double digits against Xavier. They were actually down like 16 in that game at one point. And then they were down against Georgetown last week. I believe it was last week. They were down double digits against them as well. And the offense is a real problem. I know they've been banged up a bit. Davon Smith has been in and out of the lineup. But the offense, as we've talked about, is the issue with this team. As good as they are defensively, I would classify them in the same range of outcomes as Tennessee. Honestly, elite defense, top 10 tier at the very least in my eyes. They have so many great wing defenders, but they don't have any shooting that they can trust, and their ball handling, especially without Smith, is a bit of an issue. And they also kind of feel like Oregon in the amount, they probably could have been classified in fraud watch as well, just with the amount of comeback runs that they've needed to make, and they haven't played 40 minutes of solid basketball. It's been more of a spurt of 10 to 15 minutes of really good basketball and 25 minutes of very uninspiring basketball. So yeah, definitely would classify this team as a bit of a fraud long term.
Yeah, I agree. I have never been super high on them, as anyone who's been listening to this podcast has seen over the course of it. But yeah, they've had to work really hard for some of these wins against teams that are, much worse than them. So come March, that's not going to be easy to do on a neutral site, where if you get down double digits in March, you might as well just go hop on the plane at halftime. It's not an easy thing to come back from, especially where their offense can be, super inconsistent, right? They don't necessarily have elite shooting all over the court. So that could pose some big problems come March.
Yeah, they really have zero shooting, honestly. We thought Wilcher was going to be a bit better, but that's not really his game as a spot-up shooter or really even a movement shooter. He's been being used in more of a point guard role without Smith lately as well, and that's not really his spot either. So definitely some issues on the offensive end that I'm not sure that I don't really think they can really fix because it is a personnel issue.
Yeah, Wilcher's been really inefficient too. I can't tell you how many games I've seen 3 for 10, 3 for 13. Seems like those are popping up quite a bit, and I think he's shooting sub 30% from three after shooting 41% last year from three on, probably not as many attempts, but still, he's got to be better than that for what they needed. So St. John's definitely a team I'm looking at as a fraud right now. Anyway, we've got some good games coming this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Going to quickly talk about some of the things to watch out for here this weekend. First game tonight, we've got Maryland at Illinois. Illinois looking to bounce back after that loss on Sunday against Michigan State by 2. I think this is a really good spot for them to get right. I think they come out very motivated, probably a long week of practice after that. Tough loss. Yakachonis was in foul trouble, but they still hung in on Sunday. I think they come out tonight and they handle business in a pretty comfortable way and take down Maryland, I would say by double digits.
Yeah, I think so too. And hopefully Jonas can stay on the floor for more than 10 minutes, but I think they can win this game even if he gets into some foul trouble. But Maryland has been a very weird team. Like Ken Pom and Torvik love this team, but they don't really have any major wins. Like I don't even know if they have a quad one win so far this season. Like their best wins are what against Ohio State and
UCLA.
Villanova. UCLA was a solid win. It's not really aging all that well, but yeah, they just haven't like outside of Gillespie, who's been really, really good. Queen is starting to not regress, but maybe hasn't been as spectacular as we anticipated him to be the rest of the year. And his defensive motor is something that I kind of worry about. I thought that two-headed monster up front was going to make it a really good defensive team. And while they've still been closer to 25 or 30th ranked, I really expected this defense to be top 10 with the personnel that they had. But Derek Queen as an anchor on the defense is something that I'm a little bit concerned with.
Yeah, I agree. I think Maryland, especially on the road, I don't think they're that great of a team. So I think Illinois tonight just kind of does what they need to do to get back on track. We've seen Maryland have some blunders on the road at Washington. At Northwestern, they lost last week. So I think this is just a tough spot for them. It's almost a schedule loss. It feels like, after Illinois lost that game Sunday, like this is a game they need. They're going to want pretty badly. So I think it's a good get right spot for them.
For sure. It'll be a fun game to watch in general, too. There's a lot of talent on the floor in this game. Definitely excited to watch Jonas play, 30 minutes again. And, Queen's obviously spectacular. He's going to have a tough matchup against Ivisic, who, can contain him in the post, but that'll be a fun battle.
Yeah. Tomorrow night, we've got a game, Michigan at Purdue. Purdue looking to bounce back after their loss. But I think this game is going to be really interesting in terms of how Purdue guards them. Because Purdue's defense isn't great, and Michigan has the two bigs, and Wolf, who's playing that point center, and Vlad Golden, who's been really good too. So it'll be interesting to see how Matt Painter comes out and matches up.
Yeah, and I think I like Michigan in this game. I think the front court duo of Wolf and Golden is better than the duo that Painter's throwing out there and Kaufman Wren and Caleb First lately. He's been playing a ton of minutes, but I don't really think they can contain Danny Wolf all that well. If they run that 4 or 5 pick and roll, I'm not really sure how they cover it. And Michigan's ball pressure, I think, can give Purdue some issues outside of, Braden Smith being able to handle the ball. I don't think they have a ton of other handlers, and this perimeter defense of Michigan is something that doesn't get talked about all that much. And I think they can give them some serious problems. That's been the issue with Purdue all year. Like, they lost to A&M, they lost to Penn State on the road, and those teams are super high pressure teams with a lot of athleticism on the perimeter. I think it rears its head again here. And I like Michigan's rim dominance and defense to win this game on the road, despite Purdue coming off that loss at Mackey.
Yeah, I definitely don't hate that take. And that, like, looking at it matchup wise, it's going to be tough. I think if Purdue's going to win this game, they're going to have to turn over Michigan a bunch, which is, Michigan does. That's what they do. So they're going to have to turn them over a bunch.
Michigan, they're going to feel super comfortable in this game. Like, that's not Purdue's nature. Like, they don't pressure the ball that much, and I think it gives them a real avenue to win this game and win by margin. It's more of a bold take. I do think Michigan can get pretty close to winning this game by double digits. I know this is probably going to turn around. Purdue wins by 25, and I look like an idiot. But I'll go out on a limb and say that Michigan can win this game by double digits.
Don't hate it. Now looking ahead to Saturday, pretty good game here in the ACC. Duke at Wake Forest. I believe Wake Forest has now won like 6 in a row. Duke going on the road. Quality road test here. Duke's projected to be favored by 12 in this game. Pretty big number. But Duke's just firing on all cylinders right now, just playing great basketball. I don't really know what to make of that number on the spread, but I think that Duke takes care of business and wins this game.
I might be taking Wake Forest at that number. I can't stop buying this team, especially lately. Like the insertion of Tyler Johnson in the lineup, as I've talked about on a few other podcasts on the Best Bet podcast a little bit, he's kind of pushed Salas and Hildreth off the ball and put them more in the roles that they're used to being in. Now that, Johnson, he's playing like 30 minutes a game now, and he hasn't been great. He's a little bit turnover prone, as you saw late in the UNC game, where he just basically threw the ball right into UNC's hands twice and almost allowed them to come back and win that game. But overall, it's been a positive with him on the floor, and Salas has been incredible. I wouldn't be surprised if they competed with Duke in this game. Like, Duke's been kind of just waltzing through the ACC right now, and Wake Forest is trending up, and I don't think they're getting enough credit for how good they've been. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a really good game. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say Wake Forest wins this game because Duke is the class of this conference by a mile, but
yeah.
I want to see a really good game here at least.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see it. We also have Texas A&M at Texas round 2. They played a couple weeks ago. Texas played them tight for a half, then got dominated in the second half on the glass. Ended up winning by about 20 or losing by about 20. The projected spread here is Texas minus 1.5. This would be a massive resume builder for the Longhorns. And it'd be a huge week for them after taking down Missouri earlier in the week. And then if they were to beat Texas A&M on Saturday, this would be a huge one for them. So I think the game's still going to come down to, who can control the glass. That's really what every game is against Texas A&M, and that's something that travels, right? Their ability to just relentlessly attack the glass, like you can't factor that into home court. They just do it.
Yeah, they're so good on the road just because they can, obviously they win the shot volume battle every single night. And, you could say like who wins the rebound battle? Like it's 99% of the time it's going to be A&M, but Texas needs to take care of the ball. I think that's going to be their avenue to win this game. And they need a little bit of work out of their spot up shooting. Like they need a little more work outside of Pope and Johnson. They need Mark to hit some shots from the perimeter. They're going to need Kaluma to be great again in this game. I think they can be, but I don't like going against A&M on the road. Like as an underdog, I think it's always like a good side to take, like from a betting perspective. But I'll say A&M wins this game on the road just because I like their profile in those situations.
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of it. It's probably, as a Texas fan, I'm probably gonna plead the fifth and say, well, I'll just watch it and see what happens. I think I'm expecting a good game, a better game than we got in the second half at Texas A&M. But like I said, if Texas can figure out a way to win this game, that would go a long way for them in terms of determining their fate come March. Another game also in the SEC on Saturday, we have Mississippi at Missouri. Missouri looking to bounce back after their loss at Texas. Projected spread here, Missouri -4. I think Missouri wins this game. I think Missouri bounces back after that loss to Texas. I still think Ole Miss is being a little bit overvalued. I know they've started to show some signs of being properly valued, but I'm still not buying it. They're going on the road here against a much better than expected Missouri team. So I'm going to side with the Tigers here to win. I'm not sure what the spread, it's 4. I don't know what to make of that number right now. But I'm going to side with Missouri at least to win the game.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if the number came out at 4. I think it'd be a little bit shorter than that just because I view Ole Miss as the better team overall. And this is kind of a weird game that I didn't think we'd really be talking about as a headliner on a Saturday coming into the season. But these teams have really emerged as, contenders in the SEC, or at least like you could talk about them being in the top 5. But I don't really know what to make of the matchup really either. I think Missouri they don't have to rely on getting into the middle of the lane to create open looks. They can kind of live on the perimeter and trust their shot making and guys like Scoop Bates and Caleb Grill. I think they can rely on them to hit outside shots. And Ole Miss on the other side, they take care of the ball so well. And Missouri, with their funky defenses that Dennis Gates likes to throw out there, they run their matchup zone. They just run a traditional 2-3. They'll press a little bit, but I think Ole Miss can handle it with the ball handling that they have across the board. Really, they have handlers 1 through 5, and that's what's made them one of the top teams in the country when it comes to taking care of the basketball. I don't know if I really have a side that I would take here. I'll lean towards Ole Miss winning the game just because I think they're the better team. But Missouri, it's a tough environment there in Columbia to go win a game, as they've shown. They've won some big home games this year.
Yeah, for sure. So another game, we got Houston at Kansas. Houston actually projected -5 on the road here.
No chance.
I honestly think Kansas wins this game. I think Kansas comes out really motivated. They rarely lose at home anyway. They come out motivated, take care of business in a tight one. I think this one's going to go down to the wire, but I wouldn't at all be surprised if Kansas wins this game. I think they're being like a little undervalued at this point.
I think Kansas has turned a corner, to be completely honest with you. The addition of Flory Badunga into the rotation has been, or playing like major minutes. He played, I believe, 26, 27 minutes last game against TCU. It's really helped out the offense more than it's helped the defense, really. They've been able to get all over the offensive glass against basically everyone in their last 4 games. And I'm not going to sit here and say that KJ Adams is like a negative for this team, but I think Badunga should be playing more minutes than Adams when Adams returns. He just doesn't bring enough value on the offensive side. It's a non-floor spacer that doesn't get on the offensive glass like Badunga does. And Kansas has really created this rim dominance. They've taken care of the ball. And I do think that can be a recipe to beat Houston. I do worry about the shooting a tad with, AJ Storr not really being fantastic. He was great last game, but they just don't have the elite floor spacing and 3-point shooting ability to break down this Houston defense. But playing at home with their improved defense, and Houston has shown cracks in their offensive game, especially since Shed isn't there anymore. They've had to rely on Uzan a little bit more. I think I'm going to say Kansas wins this game at home. I mean, I'd be shocked if the line came out at 5. I think it's closer to 1.5 or 2. And I might still consider taking Kansas at that number. I really do think they've turned a corner on the offensive end too.
Yeah. No, I agree. And then the last game we're going to talk about, Tennessee at Auburn. Auburn is actually projected here -10 at home. Big number, but Tennessee's shown their flaws. Auburn's shown they can still win big without Broome. So for anyone looking to bet on this game, at least my advice is stay away. But I think Auburn wins this game.
Yeah, and I would be another line that I would be surprised to see. I think that's a line that implies that Broome is in. So I think you're going to see something around 7, maybe 6.5. And I don't trust Tennessee one bit to go on the road at Auburn, especially one of the top home courts in the entire country, and generate enough offense to go win a game. I just don't really see it. I think Auburn's athletes and ability to stay home on shooters and have a guy chase Chaz Lanier around, I think gives Tennessee some real problems. Obviously, Tennessee can get on the glass a little bit to generate some offense, but overall, I just trust Auburn. I think they're an elite team. Obviously, they're still a top 5 team, probably without Janai Broome, and I think they get it done at home.
Yeah. And then one other game I wanted to just quickly mention, not really to talk about, but one I'm going to be keeping an eye on. Kentucky at Vanderbilt. Kentucky's projected -1 here. This is a game that I'm really interested to see how Vanderbilt plays. Kentucky coming off the loss to Alabama last weekend. We'll see kind of what they look like on the road against a Vanderbilt team that's shown they can win at home against high-level competition. So really interested to see the outcome of that game.
Yeah, it should be a fun game. Super fast-paced, too, and Vandy's defense is going to get tested. I think their perimeter defenders are good enough to hold Kentucky down a little bit. But getting into a track meet with Kentucky isn't really the best proposition. We just saw this happen when Vandy had to go play Bama on Tuesday night, I believe, and it wasn't pretty. I mean, they hung around for a little bit, but I do think the more talented team in Kentucky can win out there. They'll be able to take care of the ball well enough to get it done.
Yeah. No, it feels like a Kentucky win. Feels like a trap to try and get people to bet on the fact that Vanderbilt won last weekend at home against Tennessee. But, an interesting game nonetheless. But should be a good weekend of games. That just about does it for our episode here today. We've got, a bunch of games over the weekend. We'll have a best bets episode coming out tomorrow, I believe. A couple other things to note. We do have t-shirts in stock now. Anyone who wants one, they're available for purchase now. So get yours while you can. Feel free to message us either personally or through any of the Mainly Hoops social media pages. But other than that, hope you guys enjoy the games, and we'll talk to you in the next episode as we break down this wild weekend of games.